Chapter 379, Joining One. Throughout her story, Chong Ryong was filled with anger and sorrow as she recalled the past. Mok Jae-eun listened intently to Chong Ryong's tale. As she recounted everything up to the moment she breathed her last, Chong Ryong seemed overwhelmed with emotion and shed tears of blood once again. How deep must her resentment be to shed tears of blood despite being a bodiless spirit? Mok Jae-eun silently grasped her hand. He felt it was the right thing to do. Grasp. Chong Ryong, who was sobbing, held Mok Jae-eun's hand tightly, like a child clinging to a parent's hand for support. Although a vengeful spirit's body should feel cold as its pure yin energy, Mok Jae-eun found her hand strangely warm. However, as she recounted her final moments, the strength in her hand weakened. It was when she spoke of wanting to become his bride. As she tearfully told the story, she looked at Mok Jae-eun sheepishly, feeling somewhat embarrassed. I got carried away while speaking. She felt she shouldn't have mentioned that last part. She worried that the mortal might be disappointed after learning about her feelings for him. That's how much she loved him. To the point of thinking only of him even in her dying moments. Mok Jae-eun stared at her as she remained silent out of embarrassment, then spoke. But hearing it all, one thing seems strange. Strange? What do you mean? Chong Ryong so. At the end you clearly lost your father and clan, but it seems you saw that man, and the junior head of Heaven Vane or whoever die. How did you become a vengeful spirit? Of course, you could remain due to deep resentment from losing your family, but her fundamental resentment was towards that Bai Yonghyun. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say everything stemmed from him. But according to her story, it seemed this Bai Yonghyun had likely been dealt with by him, whom she liked so much. It was then. No, he didn't die. What? He didn't die. I too thought he had died because of his scream I heard at the end. But he was alive. How do you know that? I sensed it. You sensed it? That he was alive. I may not know now after 100 years have passed, but at that time he was certainly alive. He lived on to humiliate me to the very end. How much time had passed? Deep resentment becomes Yin's spiritual energy that holds the soul in this world. A newly formed vengeful spirit doesn't immediately form self-awareness due to the adaptation period to the spiritual body change and its low rank. It took quite some time for her to gain self-awareness. When she finally formed her own consciousness, the first thing she saw was none other than a book. A book. She instinctively knew that she was strongly bound to this book. This book was a medium that allowed her to remain more firmly attached to the mortal world even as a spirit. But how could this unfamiliar book be related to her? Puzzled, she examined the book closely. And in the process, the book was made from none other than her own heart. Having become a spirit, she could now see the world differently, so she instinctively knew. What on earth had they done with her heart? She opened the book made by drying and pressing her heart. Inside, like any other book, words were inscribed one by one. The words were the verses of the Moon Sword technique, which combined the 8 thought-shattering techniques with her moonless void sword. 1. What is this? It was then. As if having a headache, she felt pain in her head. It was strange to feel pain when spirits shouldn't experience headaches, so why did it hurt so much? As she wondered, a faint memory flowed into her mind. It was, the heart is the source of life and also symbolizes a person's feelings. You and I will be together forever. She couldn't hide her bewilderment at his image appearing in her mind. How was this man still alive? Clearly by his hand. Suddenly, another memory flashed in her mind. He was inscribing words on her heart. Soul, I'll leave all traces of you here. Clench. She bit her lip hard and raged. Was he looking at this constantly after inscribing it on her heart as if doing it for her sake? Rumble, rumble, rumble. As her enraged spiritual energy spread out, the surroundings shook. He was so angry. It was already miserable enough to become a vengeful spirit due to unresolved resentment, but was he humiliating her even after death? Unable to endure the humiliation from him even after death, I went berserk. Although I hadn't yet properly gained power as a vengeful spirit, I was consumed by the thought of killing him. Were you sealed by him then? When he first met Chong Ryong, or rather Ryu So-wol, the secret manual made from her heart, which was her medium, was clearly sealed by some magic. According to her story, it was highly likely that she had been sealed to stop her rampage. But I don't know. To be honest, I don't remember anything from this point on. You don't remember? Yes. I have no memory of how I was sealed. She had tried to recall that moment many times, but couldn't remember no matter how hard she tried. To this, Mok Jae-eun said with a tone of regret. Then you don't know how that secret manual made from your heart ended up in Yun Mok Sword Manor either? I don't remember. When I was sealed, I was essentially cut off from the outside world. That period was close to 100 years. However, she had endured solely with the thought of revenge. Because of him, she lost her family and caused pain to the man she loved by making him lose someone precious. That remained as deep resentment and pain even as she was dying. Only this resentment sustained me. Enduring for such a long time while harboring deep resentment was a battle against loneliness. She had persevered steadfastly through the long loneliness. However, no matter how strong a vengeful spirit, that terrible loneliness inevitably ate away at one's own heart. That's why she had crumbled in front of Mok Jae-eun, who shook her. After hearing the whole story, Mok Jae-eun, though unskilled in emotions, could understand in his heart how difficult and lonely a battle she had fought. Therefore, grasp. He held her hand and spoke as if making a vow. I promise you. I'll erase everything related to him from this world. Even if he's already dead and gone, it doesn't matter. Her expression became strange at Mok Jae-eun's pledge, which carried a sense of murderous intent. Until now, she had been a spirit interested in nothing but her own revenge. She couldn't help but feel strange that such a person was now vowing revenge for her sake. But soon she spoke with tearful eyes. I'm sorry, mortal. My heart is rotten and decayed, as good as dead long ago. There might be no place for you to settle in it. That doesn't matter. You say such things even after hearing this. I can't help that I've already come to like you. 100 years had passed since her death. Despite that, he still remained in her heart. That's why it was even more difficult for her. Both in life and death, she had considered only him as her man. Yet now, she found herself wavering at every word of this mortal whose fate wasn't even that long, and she felt utterly resentful of herself. Is it just because of loneliness? Is that why she wants to lean on him whenever he shakes her? She couldn't understand why her heart, which had been like an old tree that would break rather than bend, was now swaying like a reed. She shouldn't be like this, but every time she looks at him, he strangely comes to mind. From his manner of speech to his appearance, nothing resembled him at all, yet she couldn't understand why this was happening. I can't. She shook her head repeatedly. She stared intently at Mok Jae-eun, who was holding her hand tightly. Despite being a spirit, her chest ached. Should I have kept it to myself? For the first time she had told this story to someone, and it made her feel somewhat relieved to have shared it. However, she couldn't help but feel bitter. It seemed like she had dampened his spirits. Even though he said it was okay, he would have realized that he still remained in her heart, so even this mortal wouldn't feel too good about it. Mortal. It's all right. What? Chong Ryong. I guess I've gotten too used to it. Anyway, So-wol has feelings too, and it's not wrong that she liked someone and kept him in her heart. Moral. This guy is unexpectedly good at touching others' hearts. A person who doesn't even properly understand his own emotions. For someone so bleak and cold to try to comfort her instead. Perhaps that's why her chest feels even more tingly. It's strange. What do you mean? Actually, if I followed my heart, I'd want to steal even So-wol's feelings for someone else. But after hearing the story, I realized that doing so would just repeat another pain for So-wol. I don't want that for her. So for now, I want to focus on my revenge and resolving So-wol's resentment. At these words from Mok Jae-eun, her eyes welled up with tears. Your words like this shake me even more. She wanted to say those words, but she quickly composed herself and somehow calmed her emotions. It was the first time her heart had gone to someone other than him. But she had to suppress this feeling. The fate between you and me must end with revenge. There was a predetermined end when a vengeful spirit resolves its resentment. Because there was a set ending, she couldn't waver anymore. Realizing this anew, she firmly grasped her wavering heart. Yes. You're right, mortal. Let's focus on your revenge and resolving my resentment for now. And you don't have to force yourself to call me Ryu So-wol when it doesn't even feel natural to you. I'll get used to it, Sue. Just call me Chong Ryong. What? I want you to keep calling me Chong Ryong. On a dark night, two carriages appeared at the foot of a mountain not far from Spiritual Sword Sanctuary. The ones driving these two carriages were none other than Siep Chun and Mong Muyak, subordinates of Mok Jaeongun. They had barely managed to catch up to their lord, who had flown ahead using the shadow sword flying technique. As they came this far, thinking they only needed to find the treasure bead and wouldn't have to enter Spiritual Sword Sanctuary's territory, they had somehow reached a place not too far from it. Spiritual Sword Sanctuary was the domain of O Cheonmu, one of the six heavens, so even their lord wouldn't have approached this place carelessly. But why was there still no news? It was then. Screech. Whoa. Siep Chun, who was driving the horse behind, was startled and stopped when the carriage in front suddenly halted. Siep Chun then shouted towards the front. "Wait. You should signal when you're stopping." Soon Siep Chun could see why the carriage in front had stopped. There were people in front of the carriage who appeared to be sword disciples from Spiritual Sword Sanctuary. Siep Chun quickly launched himself towards the front of the carriage to support them, but... swoosh. What's this? He saw that Mong Muyak had a strange expression on his face. Xing. Although puzzled, he tried to draw his unique weapon, the Guangmudo, to prepare for a fight when... Stop. Mong Muyak held him back. Stop? Huh. Suddenly something caught Siep Chun's eye. In the center of the Spiritual Sword Sanctuary sword disciples was a middle-aged man at the Transcendent Realm, who was respectfully cupping his hands in salute to them. Why on earth were they doing this? As he wondered, his lordship is waiting. From here on, it will be difficult to move by carriage, so please follow on foot. His lordship? You mean the master of Spiritual Sword Sanctuary? Did they notice our entry and send someone? As he was thinking this, no. Lord Heavenly Demon sent us to escort you all. For a moment Siep Chun doubted his ears. Lord Heavenly Demon? Chapter 380 Joining 2. In the Society Leaders' Quarters at the main hall of Heaven and Earth Society. Cough cough. Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian clicked his tongue at the coughing sound coming from behind the screen. The coughing was getting worse and he desperately wanted to call for wailing Dr. Ho Ta. However, the society leader strangely seemed unwilling to receive treatment. Instead of treatment, he kept obsessing over the Holy Fire Priestess of the Fire Faith Order, and Mong Xiaoqian couldn't understand why. Could bringing her in really improve his condition? We must heal him somehow. The society leader didn't even have children, only 3 disciples. If he at least had a child, there would be a justification to solidify the succession plan. But now the factions had split into 3 and tensions were growing. Especially, the first disciple's movements are concerning. Since emerging from seclusion, first disciple Na Yulriang had been moving without hesitation. He was subjugating all the neutral sects, and it seemed he would soon clash properly with the alliance of second disciple Zhang Nung AK and third disciple Y Soyan. Or they might already be fighting in unseen places. Well, up to this point was somewhat understandable. A successor needs to be decided anyway. Otherwise, the internal strife would continue, which would become poison for the association in the future. However, there are rumors that the Elder Council is contacting first disciple Na Yulriang. The other sects are one thing, but they... Cough cough. So the time has finally ripened. Pardon? What does he mean by the time ripening? As he wondered, the society leader's voice continued from behind the screen. It means they no longer wish to go through me. How can that be? No matter what, how can the retired elders interfere in the association's internal affairs? Leave them be. They only move on his orders anyway. By him, you don't mean? Who else could it be? At the society leader's question, Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian frowned. He thought he knew who the society leader was referring to. But hadn't that person passed away long ago? How could the Elder Council? More importantly, have they not arrived yet? The society leader asked then. If they escaped Kaifeng safely, they should be getting quite close to the main hall by now. Only then did Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian realize who the society leader was talking about. Actually, an express message just arrived from Muyak. How are things progressing? They succeeded in escaping safely, but due to pursuit from the imperial capital, they had to deviate from their original route to shake off pursuers. It seems they'll be coming via Guizhou province. Guizhou. So they're coming from the west? Cough cough. It appears so. Besides this, there's also something urgent I need to report. Urgent? Yes, because of this, the movements of the Righteous Alliance are concerning. Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian passed the prepared report towards the screened bed. As he received and slowly examined it, the society leader's eyes flickered. The seventh heaven? Young Master O Wung Huang of Spiritual Sword Sanctuary, who had personally guided Mok Jiangun's subordinates to one of the empty guest rooms, politely greeted them before coming out. Please rest well then. Only after moving quite far from the guest room did one of the Spiritual Sword Sanctuary sword disciples assisting him cautiously speak up, seeming not to understand. Young master. Was there really a need for you to guide them personally? Couldn't you have just left it to us? At these words, young Master O Wung Huang chuckled and replied. If it was something I could leave to you, I would have. But regardless of the outcome, since they've entered under our Lord's command, shouldn't we check what kind of people his subordinates are? So that was your intention? I failed to grasp the young master's thoughts. There's no need to think so deeply about it. It's fine, don't worry about it. But how were they? What do you mean? Lord Heavenly Demon's subordinates. I was quite surprised. That fallen monk is clearly Jia Jiamzhong, one of the three madmen, isn't he? Yes, it seems so. Young Master O Wung Huang was also unable to hide his surprise at seeing the fallen monk Jia Jiamzhong. However, what surprised him even more wasn't Jia Jiamzhong. No matter how much he observed, he couldn't gauge the martial prowess of the one wearing the mask with unique patterns and the one leaning on the snake staff. Because of this, he could guess that they were experts above his level. None of them are ordinary. Not just those two, but the fallen monk Jia Jiamzhong and even the two who looked youngest were the same. Both had reached the transcendent realm. How could all his subordinates be so extraordinary? With just these people alone, they could wipe out one or two small to medium-sized sects in a single night. Having such amazing people under him, it was puzzling how his name and reputation hadn't become known until now. Now that his father O Qianmu, one of the six heavens and Spiritual Sword Sanctuary, had come under his command, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say their strength had doubled. What on earth does the Lord intend to do with this tremendous power? He grew increasingly curious. Inside the guest room, as soon as the young master of Spiritual Sword Sanctuary who had guided them withdrew and his presence disappeared, Siep Chun spoke as if dumbfounded. Am I dreaming right now? At his question, Mong Muyak also shook his head with a somewhat blank expression. He too was just as surprised. When the young master of Spiritual Sword Sanctuary first mentioned Lord Heavenly Demon, he wondered what was going on. But everyone was shocked by what he said next. Our Spiritual Sword Sanctuary has sworn to serve Qianma as our lord. This was the same for Ma Arihayan, who usually doesn't express emotions well, wearing the mask, and Guyong Sao, who was living a new life wearing the human skin mask and wielding the 8 poison snake staff. They too couldn't hide their surprise at young Master O Wung Huang's words. This was because if Spiritual Sword Sanctuary had been an ordinary sect, they might have brushed it off, but they were master craftsmen who had a huge influence on the sword techniques of the Central Plains martial arts world. Moreover, their leader, Master O Qianmu, was one of the 6 heavens who could be considered the pinnacle of the current martial arts world. To think such an incredible existence had sworn loyalty to their lord, Mok Jiangun. It was hard to believe even after hearing it. It seems we're serving a far more extraordinary person than we expected. Don't you all agree? At Siep Chun's words, everyone nodded silently. This incident had given them such a great shock. Even the events at Shaolin Temple and Sichuan Tang Clan could be considered amazing, but if this news spreads through the martial arts world, the impact will be tremendous. After all, a place like Spiritual Sword Sanctuary, which has a huge influence on the current martial arts world, has come under our Lord's command. It seems we've underestimated our Lord. At that moment, Mong Muyak, who had been silently listening to Siep Chun's words, spoke up. Underestimated? Yes. You say that even after observing him so closely? I do. Of course, until now, I simply thought our Lord's goal was just to become the society leader's 4th disciple. At these words, Siep Chun's eyes also became strange. He too realized what Mong Muyak meant by saying this. The reason he decided to follow Mok Jiangun was partly due to his martial prowess and great capacity, but decisively because he thought he was a candidate for the next head. But it turned out as Mong Muyak said. It truly was an underestimation. Their lord's capacity wasn't something they could casually evaluate. Who could have imagined he would subjugate one of the six heavens who stands on the same level as the society leader? Their lord was already beyond what the society leader could encompass. He was a great master in his own right. At that moment, the fallen monk Jiajiamzhong, who had been sipping alcohol from a gourd bottle, interjected. So you guys have been following the master for such petty reasons until now? Pwahaha. Who's becoming whose disciple? He burst into laughter as if finding it amusing. At his attitude, Sip Chun scratched his head, speaking in a somewhat wrong tone. You don't know what you're talking about. If you knew how quickly our Lord has become stronger, you wouldn't say such things. Although he was already a monster when he left the association, it wasn't to this extent. Not only did he break through the wall of walls to become a master of the profound realm, but he even subjugated one of the six heavens. Monster. Yes. This is a real monster. Ma Arehayan, who was silently leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, also inwardly clicked his tongue. When he first met Mok Jiangan, he didn't expect his capabilities to grow so rapidly. Even when leaving the imperial palace, didn't even Gu Songbek, the northern sect Blade King and also southern pacification commissioner, another of the six heavens, struggle against the combined attack of 6,000 commander So Yaren and leader of the Nine Blood sect. But now he's on par with the pinnacle six heavens. Has there ever been someone in martial arts history who became this strong so quickly? If it had happened over a few years, it might be understandable, but the fact that it occurred in just a couple of months was even more unbelievable. Then Sip Chun said, but it's a bit regrettable. What is? Think about it. Although he's using the alias Heavenly Demon, Kionma, because of the imperial pursuit, imagine if our Lord had made his reputation under his real name. Real name? Yes. If our Lord had destroyed the Shaolin 108 Arhat formation, closed Sichuan Tang clan for 60 years, and subjugated spiritual sword sanctuary under the name Mok Jiangan, his reputation alone would have secured the society leader's position. But I don't understand why he doesn't want to reveal this even to the association. At Sip Chun's words, Mong Muyak snorted. Are you really asking because you don't know? What? Hugh. You really don't know? Well, I guess you only know how to swing a knife. Someone like you who doesn't know how to use the head on your shoulders wouldn't think that far. Then why don't you, who's so smart, explain our Lord's intentions? Even without knowing his intentions, our Lord doesn't need to reveal that he is Kionma. He doesn't need to reveal it? Yes. Do you think only the first disciple and the second and third disciples would be wary if our Lord revealed that? No. Our Lord is a new force recruited from outside. Moreover, he's from the righteous faction. Although he was recognized solely for his talent, if they realize that talent is at an uncontrollable level, how do you think the association will react? At these words, Sip Chun spoke in a cooled voice. They might go beyond wariness and even try to prevent him from entering the association again. Now you're starting to understand. Mok Jiangan had already reached a level where he could directly compete with the society leader. If such a person tried to enter, he would inevitably face all kinds of opposition and, in the worst case, might be rejected from even entering, let alone joining. It's not that I'm completely thoughtless, but it's interesting to see you analyze so coolly. Although you reluctantly pledged loyalty to our Lord, your identity originates from being the successor to Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian, the society leader's right-hand man, doesn't it? At Sip Chun's words, Mong Muyak's eyes flickered. He had thought Sip Chun was simple-minded, but it seems he had been constantly monitoring him for Mok Jiangan, or rather their lord's sake. Did he think he might betray them at any time? Of course it's understandable. Even he would have constantly doubted someone who joined in this manner. But not anymore. That was true. But now it's different. Different. Yes. Now I'm just someone who wants to see how far our Lord will go. At his words, the corners of Sip Chun's mouth turned up. That's a first. Our thoughts aligning, Chapter 381, Joining, 3. Yes. Now I'm just someone who wants to see how far our Lord will go. That's a first. Our thoughts aligning, He felt the same way. Sip Chun, who had no special connections, had thought it would be more than enough if Mok Jiangan just became the society leader's fourth disciple. But now things were different. Having witnessed their lord's monstrous growth and extraordinary aspects up close, he wanted to stay by his side and see just how far he could go. Perhaps they were now standing at the center of a new chapter in Central Plains history. But they didn't know. They were unaware that someone was listening to their conversation from outside. The one standing in front of the door was none other than Mok Jae-eun. What? Feeling pressured? At Chong Ryong's words, Mok Jae-eun chuckled. It wasn't exactly pressure. He had simply gathered people he could use efficiently for his revenge, but he was puzzled that their expectations were higher than he thought. Simply using people is mere employment and commanding. I suppose so. But leading people is different. It's about bringing many along on the path you want to walk, towards the dreams you wish to fulfill. Bringing them along? Mok Jae-eun's eyes, which had been smiling, became subtle at Chong Ryong's meaningful words. These people were like chess pieces to him. Most of them had submitted to him unwillingly, so he thought they would see themselves that way too, but he didn't expect them to harbor such thoughts. Chess pieces. Pieces to be discarded when their usefulness ends. Yet such pieces are pinning their hopes on his dreams. It's a strange feeling. Until recently, hearing such words wouldn't have stirred much emotion in him. But at some point, new emotions began sprouting like seedlings in barren soil. Don't assume you were born this way. You've simply closed yourself off. That's what his grandfather always used to tell him. Back then he couldn't understand those words. He didn't know specifically what emotions meant and only felt them abstractly. But ever since he first felt the emotion of liking someone, it seems numerous emotions have been deriving and spreading from it. Living up to expectations. Emotions don't seem to stop at just one. Endless might be the right expression. Then Chong Ryong said, "Don't feel burdened. Neither I nor anyone else is forcing you to lead others. But try to understand their hopes." Chong Ryong understood both their expectations and Mok Jae-eun. Their path was actually different from those who were driven solely by revenge. This was just an intersection. Then Mok Jae-eun spoke through mental transmission. Wasn't Chong Ryong's original wish to lead others? At this sudden question, Chong Ryong showed a bitter expression. This mortal had come to know too much about her. Every word he says shakes and pierces through her. Even if that was the case, I no longer cling to dreams that have crumbled like sandcastles. A vengeful spirit's only wish is to resolve its resentment. Is that really all? What exactly are you trying to say? I've been thinking. Thinking what? Since we're doing this anyway, why not do it thoroughly? Of course we'll eliminate everything related to him, but I also want to reclaim everything he took from you, Chong Ryong. Mortal. Are you perhaps? Before she could finish her words, the sound of someone walking approached from behind. Step, step. The one approaching, deliberately making footsteps loud enough to announce his presence, was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his mid-50s, with black hair but graying beard and eyebrows. The moment he saw him, Mok Jae-eun immediately recalled. Is that the man from the Sword Valley? He remembered. The Sword disciples had called him Jui. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say he was the highest expert apart from Master Oh Cheon-mu and the swordsman. Mok Jae-eun's eyes flickered as he looked at him. The reason was, "It seems you've gained some enlightenment." Flinch. At Mok Jae-eun's words, he who had been approaching suddenly stopped and frowned. This was because he had been staring intently at the sword Mok Jae-eun had carved on the cliff of the Sword Valley for over half a day, gaining enlightenment there. Of course, not everyone had gained enlightenment like him. Most of the other sword disciples were overwhelmed by the high level of swordsmanship, feeling discouraged, and some even left after planting their swords in the Sword Valley. There were even those who broke their own swords, unable to bear the self-loathing. You're certainly different. To notice that I gained enlightenment without even crossing swords. You were the most eye-catching person besides the master. Eye-catching? It's an honor for a great master like you to say so. Is it really such an honor? Mok Jae-eun shrugged his shoulders. Just then the door opened and Seop Chun spoke with surprised eyes. "Pai Lord." He had many things he wanted to say. He was curious if they had found the treasure bead, and most of all he wanted to ask how they had subjugated Spiritual Sword Sanctuary and Oh Cheon-mu, one of the six heavens. But as he was about to ask, he sensed a strange atmosphere. What's this? Who is that man? He exuded an extraordinary aura. Was the reason my lord was standing in front of the guest room door because of this man? As he wondered, Mong Muyak, who had been waiting behind to pay his respects, pushed past him and couldn't hide his surprise. "Oh my! Do you know him? It's Zhou Yi." Zhou Yi. Mong Muyak, who was in the society leader's direct intelligence department, had memorized the appearances of all famous figures in the martial arts world. That's why he recognized who Zhou Yi was the moment he saw him. When it comes to spiritual sword sanctuary, of course Master O Qion Mu the craftsman and the Holy Land of Swords are famous, but Zhou Yi and Gakko were also well known. He was especially famous because he had been staying here as a guest for over 20 years. Unlike other swordsmen who came to the Sword Valley for enlightenment and learning, he had stayed this long solely to surpass Master O Qion Mu's swordsmanship, earning him the nickname Mad Swordsman among martial artists. A guest obsessed with swords. It was a title that suited him perfectly. Seop Chun clicked his tongue and muttered, "What a coincidence! To see one of the rare three madmen here again." The three madmen. They are three individuals in the martial arts world called madmen. Their martial prowess reached the level of top experts in major sects, but due to their inherently eccentric and unpredictable nature, people called them the three madmen. Now two of these three madmen had gathered in one place. This was why Seop Chun said it was a coincidence. What? Did someone say something about the three madmen? At that moment, Jia Jiamzhong, who had been sipping alcohol from a gourd bottle, came out thinking he heard someone calling the three madmen. Seop Chun said to him, "I wasn't calling you. Then why did you mention the three madmen? Have you heard of Senior Zhou Yi the Mad Swordsman?" Mad Swordsman? Ugh. That old man who's wasting his years obsessed with swords. Wasting years obsessed with swords? The distance wasn't far, so there was no way he couldn't hear what was being said about him. He glared at Jia Jiamzhong with an unpleasant expression. "What? You want to try me?" At this, Jia Jiamzhong showed a competitive spirit. He had seen one of the other three madmen by chance due to some connection, but this was his first time seeing Zhou Yi the Mad Swordsman. He who had been staring at Jia Jiamzhong, who seemed ready to fight at any moment, soon softened his expression and stepped back with a grin. "Well, you're not wrong. I did waste my youth obsessed with swords. Old man, aren't you accepting it too easily? What can I do when it's not wrong?" Tisich. Jia Jiamzhong clicked his tongue at Zhou Yi's response. He was the type who never avoided a fight, so his competitive spirit had risen and he wanted to fight with him at least once, being called one of the three madmen. But when Zhou Yi brushed it off so smoothly, he felt disappointed. Watching this, Mong Muyak's eyes flickered. He's certainly the most gentlemanly of the three madmen. Zhou Yi was just obsessed with swords, but at least compared to the other two he was closer to the righteous path. He had never harmed anyone without reason. Then Zhou Yi turned his gaze back to Mok Jiangun and said, "I thought you were alone, but you have quite a few companions." "Yes. Do you have something to discuss with me privately?" "What would I have to discuss privately? Since they're all your companions, they'll all know anyway, so I'll get straight to the point." "Please do. There's nothing they can't hear. Listening wouldn't be difficult at all." Then, clap. He respectfully cupped his hands and bowed to Mok Jiangun, saying, "Forgive my rudeness at this late hour, but I have a request. Please cross swords with me." At those words, the eyes of his subordinates, Seop Chun and Mong Muyak, sharpened. Suddenly coming and bluntly requesting a duel with their lord, there was no way they could view this favorably. Seop Chun stepped forward and said, "Senior, what kind of discourtesy is this, suddenly coming and asking our lord for a duel?" "Lord? I thought I misheard earlier, but all these people serve you." "No now." Swish. Seop Chun, feeling displeased by the attitude of ignoring his words and only conversing with their lord Mok Jiangun, tried to protest, but Mok Jiangun restrained him with a single hand gesture. As Seop Chun closed his mouth, Mok Jiangun asked with an expressionless face, "Is there any reason I should cross swords with you?" "There isn't. But as a sword disciple pursuing the way of the sword, how could I pass up the chance to face a sword saint who has surpassed the wall of walls and reached the realm of invincible sword, the essence of sword mastery?" As soon as those words ended, Mok Jiangun's subordinates were dumbfounded. What did they just hear? Commonly, surpassing the wall is called the transformation realm. The realm of great masters who surpass the wall of the transformation realm is called the profound realm. Among the countless martial artists, those who surpass the wall are extremely rare even within a generation. There aren't many even in the entire martial arts world. Among those exceptional few with outstanding martial talent, the realm reached by surpassing the wall of the transformation realm is called the profound realm, referred to as heaven. But what is this? Surpass the wall of walls? Everyone had assumed that only the six heavens, called the pinnacle of the current martial arts world, had reached the profound realm, but what realm is above that? Someone of Jui's caliber wouldn't say such things carelessly. Then someone spoke in an amazed voice. This can't be. The owner of that voice was none other than Guyong So, wearing the human skin mask and wielding the 8 poison snake staff. Senior Guyong? At Mong Muyak's call, Guyong So spoke in a trembling voice. I've heard of it before. Heard of what? In the days of the old Murim, there was a being called the world's greatest by all. That being said, there is a realm beyond surpassing the wall of walls. A realm beyond surpassing the wall of walls? Then does that mean what he said is true? I heard it was called the life and death realm because it can only be achieved by transcending the boundary between life and death. Life and death realm? At these words, everyone looked at Mok Jaeongun with wide eyes. They had already been greatly surprised just by hearing that he had subjugated Oh Cheonmu, one of the six heavens and the master of spiritual sword sanctuary, on their way here. But now they're saying Mok Jaeongun had surpassed even the profound realm, which is called the realm of great masters and superhumans. What on earth is going on? While everyone was surprised, Mok Jaeongun spoke in a nonchalant voice. Is that all the reason you have for wanting to cross swords with me? It's not just that. For me, the sword is my entire life. He stared intently at Mok Jaeongun as he answered as if he were sincere. Sensing his sincerity, Mok Jaeongun opened his mouth with a somewhat annoyed expression. Well, if that's the case, I can't help it, but the sword isn't my entire life, so I don't feel any particular need to cross swords with you. Dui's expression hardened at the outright rejection without a moment's hesitation. He had inwardly thought that a swordsman who had reached such a realm as Mok Jaeongun would naturally be sincere about the sword, and such a person would understand his sincerity. But he didn't expect to be rejected outright. Moreover, the sword isn't his entire life? How could someone like that reach a realm surpassing Oh Cheonmu's sword techniques? Chapter 382, Joining 4. The mad swordsman Jui was dumbfounded. The sword isn't his entire life? How could someone like that reach a realm surpassing Oh Cheonmu's sword techniques? He couldn't believe it. There's a saying, 100 days for the saber, 1,000 days for the spear, 10,000 days for the sword. This means the sword is the most difficult among weapons. Even dedicating one's entire life to the sword, it's hard to achieve even small accomplishments. To reach its peak, one's mind should be entirely filled with nothing but the sword. Is he doing this on purpose? Just to avoid a duel with him? At this, Jui fell into momentary contemplation. To retreat now when the most tempting fruit imaginable is right before his eyes is unthinkable. To walk away without tasting it is unacceptable for a sword disciple. After all, the essence of a martial artist lies in their fighting spirit. My opponent is someone who has reached the pinnacle of swordsmanship, capable of receiving all I have. Even if it's discourteous if I give up this chance, such a day may never come again. Swish. With that, Yi slowly moved his hand towards his sword hilt. At that very moment, shing, thing, a sharp sword touched the back of his hand, reaching for the hilt, and the head of a snake-shaped staff was aimed at his neck. The owner of the sword was Ma Arihayan with the mask, and the snake staff belonged to Guyong So of the 8 poison snake staff. Guyong So spoke to him in a low voice. Our lord has refused. Remove that hand, Yi. At his warning, Joey's eyes sharpened. He had been skeptical due to the aura that couldn't be sensed through chi. But these two were both peerless experts who had surpassed the wall. He, who had scanned both of them with his eyes simultaneously, opened his mouth. You surprised me greatly. To command masters of the transformation realm as subordinates. No, it's not surprising considering you've even subjugated Master O, one of the 6 heavens. At his words, Mok Jaeongun looked at him indifferently and said, Is that all you have to say? It was an order to leave. He was inwardly disappointed in himself at Mok Jaeongun's indifference, showing not even a bit of interest in him. Even if he didn't measure up, to not even spark a bit of interest in this person made him feel that his life dedicated solely to the sword had been in vain. Please see him out. At Mok Jaeongun's words, waving his hand, Gyeong Sao of the 8 poison snake staff and Ma Arihayan with the mask simultaneously withdrew their staff and sword. I understand your martial artist's fighting spirit and competitive nature, but that's enough. Please leave now, You. Joey frowned. This man clearly has a young face, but why does he seem strangely old in his manner of speech? He, who had been staring intently at Gyeong Sao, turned his head. Then he said to Mok Jaeyoung, "Are you truly not willing to give me a chance?" "No. Then I have no choice but to create an opportunity myself." No sooner had those words ended. Swoosh. Joey's figure shot towards Mok Jaeyoung, kicking off the floor. "Where do you think you're going?" Bam 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 bam. Gyeong Sao and Ma Arihayan simultaneously tried to stop him, but at that moment his figure slipped past them as if sliding, reaching right in front. What kind of movement technique? What? The two experts' eyes flickered at Joey's strange movement technique. Especially Ma Arihayan, who prided himself on being faster than anyone except his lord Mok Jaeyoung and his master 6000 commander So Yerin when it came to movement techniques, was surprised. In the meantime, the sharp sword energy rising from Joey's sword intent was already rushing towards the space between Mok Jaeyoung's eyebrows. However, clang. His sword energy was deflected by an enormous fist force. Whoosh. He pushed back about 5 steps, frowned and looked at the one who had deflected him. It was none other than Jia Zhang, the fallen monk and subduing demon fist master from Shaolin. Oh. The reason Joey reacted this way was because Jia Zhang's inner force exceeded his expectations. Judging by his chi sense, he had clearly seemed to be at the transcendent realm. But just now for an instant he felt an endless power in his fist force. As if he had drawn in the energy from his surroundings. "Kurugu, I was hoping to fight you anyway. Come at me. Could it be you?" Before he could finish his words, someone grabbed his shoulder and tried to push him forward. It was Ma Arihayan. Smack. At this, Joey turned his shoulder in the direction Ma Arihayan was pushing, while lifting his back foot to kick at Ma Arihayan's head. Thud. Thanks to this, Ma Arihayan's figure was pushed forward and nearly fell. Ma Arihayan, who instantly regained his balance, narrowed his eyes sharply. He was very flexible for his age. His movements were unpredictable and full of surprises. Perhaps because of this, Ma Arihayan actually wanted to fight him properly now. Bam. Ma Arihayan took a kicking stance. Joey, widening the distance, said, "You're quite good, but you're not the one I want to fight. If you want to fight so badly, you'll have to defeat all of us first." Oh my. Swoosh. As Joey sighed, Ma Arihayan unleashed a storm-like barrage of kicks. His consecutive kicks created dozens of afterimages as they pressed forward, their speed so fast it was dizzying to watch. Cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-chong. Joey, who had already drawn his sword, blocked only the real attacks among Ma Arihayan's kicks. He focused only on the vital points as the false attacks were merely shadows anyway. But at that moment, Ma Arihayan's figure split into 3. As his figure suddenly divided, he hurriedly switched from defense to offense. He judged that defensive techniques alone wouldn't be enough to block, as all 3 split bodies possessed equal strength. As Joey's hand sped up, the trajectory created by his sword gradually increased. Cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-chong. Blue sparks flew in all directions as the leg energy from Ma Arihayan's feet clashed with Joey's sword energy, creating a clamorous metallic sound. The floor of the guest room cracked and the impact spread in all directions. Pa-pa-pa-pack. Flicking away the flying stone fragments with his hand, the fallen monk Jia Zhang clicked his tongue with a displeased expression. Damn it. This damn monk was about to fight, but that cursed blue-eyed bastard stole the lead. He was itching to jump in right away, but what fun would it be if 2 people attacked at once? He had no choice but to watch for now. Meanwhile, he seemed to have found an opening and launched a sword strike to create distance from Ma Arihayan. Toing. As Ma Arihayan, who had narrowly avoided the sword strike, tried to close in on him again. Swoosh. At that moment, Jia Zhang, who had been waiting for an opportunity, suddenly launched his body and unleashed a fist technique towards Ji. It was his unique skill, the demon subduing attack fist. Jia Zhang, who had instantly reached Joey's chest, launched his fist technique with enough force to break Joey's sword, using the 3rd form of the demon subduing attack fist, the continuous strike attack. Cha-cha-cha-cha-chong. Due to Jia Zhang's overwhelming aggressive momentum, Hui had no choice but to focus entirely on defense. He had just started to get used to Ma Reihan's offensive, but it was difficult to immediately adapt to a completely different style of attack. As a result, Jui's figure kept being pushed back. Quahahat. Good. Try blocking this too. Jiamzhong, whose momentum had risen, unleashed another form of the demon subduing attack fist. It was the 7th form of the demon subduing attack fist, the heavy pressure breaking fist. Gathering energy all at once to launch a single punch, its power was so strong that it created shockwaves, causing even the sword blade protected by sword energy to bend. What kind of inner force? He was dumbfounded for a moment, then let go of his sword hilt and employed a strange technique. It was spinning his sword like a windmill. Pang yang yang yang. As the sword rotated, it weakened the shockwave of fist pressure created by Jiamzhong. In that instant, Hui unleashed an energy release towards that shockwave. The released energy, passing through the rotating sword, flowed along Jiamzhong's fist and flung his figure backward. Poing. Whoosh. Jiamzhong pushed back about 4 steps, dispersed the inner force that had penetrated his fist through his 2 feet. Crack crack crack. The floor cracked due to the inner force flowing out from his 2 feet. White steam flowed from Jiamzhong's mouth as he dispersed the energy. Despite suffering internal injuries from the turmoil inside, his fighting spirit seemed to rise even more as the corners of his mouth stretched almost to his ears. Hugh. Joey sighed. Although they were both called part of the 3 madmen, he had thought Jiamzhong would be the weakest in martial prowess, being just a fallen monk from Shaolin. But that wasn't the case at all. He's not someone I can defeat in one breath. It seemed it would take at least dozens of exchanges before a winner could be determined. As he clicked his tongue, his gaze turned to Mok Jiangun's other subordinates who were quietly surrounding him. Each of them was formidable. He had thought if he could just shake these people off, he might be able to exchange a few moves with Mok Jiangun, but it seemed impossible now. To not even be able to handle the subordinates. If he kept fighting them, he would eventually tire out and in the end, wouldn't even be able to touch a hair on Mok Jiangun's head. Finally realizing that burning his fighting spirit was futile, Jui withdrew his energy and raised both hands. What? Why are you raising both hands? Just as his fighting spirit was rising high, Jiamzhong raised his voice when Jui showed this attitude. Regardless, Jui clearly showed he had no intention to fight with both hands raised. Then he said to Mok Jiangun, I apologize. I tried to be greedy and exchange even a few moves with you, but I can't even handle your subordinates. Hey, put those hands down. I have no more intention to fight. Shut up and put your hands down. You think we'll just let you go after you attacked our master? You must pay the price. I agree with that. Ma Reihan with the mask also agreed with Jiamzhong's opinion. The other subordinates felt the same way. Gyeongso also snorted and said, Our lord clearly gave you a chance to withdraw. We have our pride as subordinates too, and you must pay for what you've done. Surrounded by them, Guy finally had to lower his hands. There was nothing more to say in his defense as he had clearly been discourteous, so their reaction was natural. I have no choice. Since he had brought this upon himself, he couldn't avoid fighting them. Just as he was about to take a fighting stance, it happened. I hear you've been in the Sword Valley for 20 years trying to defeat Master O. At Mok Jiangun's voice, Jui answered with a faint breath. That's right. Then what were you planning to do if you lost to me? At this question, he paused for a moment, then answered as if he had put on a mask of shamelessness. The purpose of my life was to defeat Master O, who opened my eyes to the sword. But when you subdued Master O, my purpose changed. Did I become that purpose? That's right. Do you think you can win? Not yet. Then what do you intend to do? I intended to follow you until I could defeat you. As soon as his words ended, Jiamzhong snorted and shouted. You're not obsessed with the sword, you're just shameless. I've never seen someone more useless than this very own damn monk. To Jiamzhong's criticism, Jui replied nonchalantly. I don't mind if you insult me. As long as I've dedicated my life solely to the sword, I intend to focus only on the sword as long as it doesn't deviate from the right path. So devoted to the sword. Swish. As Mok Jiangun raised his hand, Jiamzhong immediately closed his mouth. As he fell silent, Mok Jiangun smiled and said, Your shamelessness is amusing. But I'm the type who likes to receive a hefty price. Price. Yes, unlike Master O, I don't feed and take care of those trying to defeat me for free. Then what do you want? He asked, showing a slightly uneasy look. To this, Mok Jaeongun replied nonchalantly. Let's take 1 year of your life as the price for fighting you. 1 year. Surely you don't mean. Yes, your loyalty. Chapter 383, Joining 5. Let's take 1 year of your life as the price for fighting you. 1 year. Surely you don't mean. Yes, your loyalty. The mad swordsman Ji couldn't hide his bewilderment at Mok Jaeongun's straightforward demand. This was because he had requested a price completely opposite to the Sword Valley, which was freely open to all those pursuing the way of the sword. Loyalty. He stared at Mok Jaeongun's face, which held a hint of a smile. To swear loyalty as the price for a duel. Even if it was a chance that might never come again, it felt like too much of a losing deal. To him, Mok Jaeongun shrugged and said, seeing you hesitate, it doesn't seem that urgent after all. That's. I said I'd only take a year, is that so difficult? I don't understand how someone who wasted 20 years here solely cultivating the sword is hesitating over this. It wasn't a waste. If it wasn't a waste, then what was it? Swish. Mok Jaeongun lightly extended his sword intent towards him. Flinch. At that moment, all the energy around seemed to rise sharply and aim at him. It was almost as if everything around had become a sword. As he marveled at this, Mok Jaeongun spoke with a mocking voice. If your 20 years don't even match my half year, it's definitely a waste of time. Half a year? What do you mean? The period I've properly learned martial arts. At those words, Hui's eyes widened as if they would tear. What did he just say? That he's only been properly learning martial arts for half a year? He wasn't the only one surprised by Mok Jaeongun's words. Mok Jaeongun's subordinates also looked at each other with surprised eyes. They all thought Mok Jaeongun's rate of progress was monstrous, but none of them knew exactly when he had started learning martial arts. But hearing it was just half a year, they were all shocked. Half a year? Impossible. He's crazy. Is he joking on purpose? To subjugate one of the 6 heavens after learning martial arts for just half a year? Even they found this hard to believe. Even Chong Ryong, who had witnessed this from the beginning, thought Mok Jaeongun's talent was monstrous. He must have been born with heavenly luck or might not even be human. Has there ever been such a genius in the history of the Central Plains martial arts world? This should only be possible for figures like Bodhidharma, who could be considered the origin of Shaolin martial arts, the birthplace of the Central Plains orthodox martial arts, Zhang Sanfeng, who founded Wudong, the sword immortal who was said to have beheaded the fire dragon, or the legendary 9 swords of Huashan. No, even they might not have been capable of this. Then Zhou Yi, whose eyes had widened in surprise, opened his mouth. Are you mocking me now? About what? No matter how talented one is in martial arts, how could it be possible in just half a year? Is something impossible for others just because you can't do it? At this question, Yi was momentarily at a loss for words. There's nothing wrong with someone else doing something he can't do. However, even starting from childhood, only a tiny fraction ever reached the highest realm, and the majority of martial artists couldn't even reach the transcendent realm, let alone break through the wall in their lifetime. But to say that one reached a level capable of subjugating one of the 6 heavens after learning martial arts for just half a year was almost unprecedented. This is maddening. Looking at Mok Jaeongun's unwavering gaze and expression, Zhou Yi's mind became confused. In fact, he had thought that although Mok Jaeongun looked young, he might actually be an old master who had undergone rebirth. But if this was true, wasn't this beyond the category of genius and into the realm of monsters? Shudder. Goosebumps rose from his spine to his whole body. To think a monster who reached the pinnacle of swordsmanship in half a year existed in this world. He who had been trembling as if convulsing from the goosebumps all over his body, finally opened his mouth. Does asking for 1 year for a single duel mean victory or defeat? Yes, have you made your decision? Can I add one condition? Condition. Yes. Even if I pledge loyalty as a branch of the renowned Orthodox sword sect, I have never deviated from the righteous path in my life. Never deviated from the righteous path. What are you trying to say? Even if I swear loyalty to you, give me the right to refuse if it's something that deviates from the righteous path. Huh. At his proposal, Mok Jae-un's subordinates all snorted. Isn't it laughable for someone swearing loyalty to put forward such a condition? Crazy bastard. If you only do what suits you, that's being a wanderer, not showing loyalty. You don't know your place. Even the fallen monk Jajimjong clicked his tongue. However, he didn't care about their reactions at all. The Mok Jae-un he had seen in the Sword Valley was far from being related to the righteous path. He was clearly closer to the demonic faction. If he followed such a person's orders blindly, he would deviate from the righteous path he had kept until now. He didn't want that. If you accept just this for 1 year. Interesting. Did you say interesting? Yes. Conditions on loyalty. Have you ever thought that I might ignore all your proposals and just kill you? Despite the brutal words, there was no killing intent in his voice. Sojui considered this just a simple warning. Therefore he carefully said, I am not your enemy. You're a reasonable person, so I think you won't go that far. I wonder. It's not because I'm reasonable that I closed off the Tang family for 60 years. Tang family? Do you mean the Sichuan Tang family? Yes. Wait, what do you mean? Before he could finish his words, Seop Chun spoke in a triumphant voice. Senior, you don't know. Our Lord single-handedly subdued the Sichuan Tang family and made them close their doors for 60 years. Dui's expression hardened. The Sichuan Tang family closed their doors? One of the pillars of the Righteous Alliance and one of the 7 great families, renowned for poisons, with potential power comparable to major sects like the 9 schools and 1 faction, closed their doors? He was truly dumbfounded. Whether this was true or not, if it was fact, it would be enough to shake the entire martial arts world that had been quiet for a while. Moreover, is he walking the path of evil? He made the Sichuan Tang family close their doors and subjugated spiritual sword sanctuary, called the Holy Land of Swords. Just these 2 actions alone made it seem like he was walking the path of evil. He whose lips had gone dry swallowed hard before finally speaking. What exactly is your goal? If you want to know that, you'll have to join my ranks. Your path is one that I think I understand why you've stagnated. What do you mean? You set limits by considering this and that about the righteous path. How can someone who starts by drawing lines in their mind ever cross those lines? At Mok Jae-un's words, Joey's pupils shook. Mok Jae-un's rebuke was like throwing a stone into a calm lake, creating ripples. Drawing lines in my mind? He had never thought of it that way before. While learning the sword, he had also devoted himself to scholarship, deeply engraving Confucius's words in his heart. At 70, I could follow what my heart desired without transgressing what was right. In the Wei Jing chapter of the Analects, Confucius said that only at the age of 70 could he follow his heart's desires without overstepping the bounds. He believed that the righteous path was the same. He had lived believing that if he deeply engraved this in his heart, he would eventually be able to do as he wished without deviating from it. But was this mindset actually setting limits for himself? He had spent over 20 years in the Sword Valley, taking pride in not deviating from the righteous path while not caring about the world's gaze or anything else. But was all of this just a limit blocking himself? It was truly meaningless. Momentarily speechless from the shock, he soon opened his mouth with eyes that seemed to have broken free from some restraint. You're right. The righteous path, the orthodox sect, in the end all of it was just drawing limits for myself. I'm glad you've realized it, even if it's now. I've realized that to reach a higher place than now, I need to embrace everything, not just stop at the orthodox path. Just saying it doesn't mean anything. Since righteousness and evil have leaned too much to one side, I too, like you, should walk a new path. A new path. The path of evil. At his words, Mok Jae-un chuckled. He told him not to draw limits, and now he says he'll walk the path of evil. Should this be called a simple idea? Well, it wasn't bad. He seemed like the type of person who needs to hit a wall and break his nose before realizing what to do. Shing. Then Ji drew his sword again and said, I'll do as you propose. If I lose, I'll serve you loyally for a year without complaint. Should I take it that you're prepared to do anything? To this question Jui, having made up his mind, answered readily. The year I swear loyalty to you will be a time to embrace evil, so I'll become a demon of the sword, not a swordsman walking the righteous path. A demon of the sword. Good. Then I'll call you Sword Demon from now on. Sword Demon. Not bad. Swish. With those words Hui took a sword stance. Looking at him, Mok Jian half drew his demonic sword evil commandment sword from his waist and said, "Then shall we start by taking that year? No matter how insufficient, one must compare to no long and short." Swish. Suddenly Yi was at a loss for words. The tip of Mok Jiangun's unique weapon, the demonic sword evil commandment sword, was already touching his neck. He had clearly been watching, but why hadn't he perceived him approaching until he was right in front? To the bewildered Yi, Mok Jiangun raised the corner of his mouth and said, "1 year. Shall we continue?" "This is just the beginning." Clang. With a shout, Yi knocked Mok Jiangun's sword upward and immediately launched into a sword technique. Had about half an hour passed? Seop Chun, leaning against the wall of the guest room, asked Mong Muyak beside him in a low voice. "What number is this now?" 26. "Oh my. That's already 25 years. He's so stubborn." Seop Chun nodded, seeming to agree with Mong Muyak's sigh-filled words. If he had realized he was no match after the first exchange, he should have stopped right away. But when Mok Jiangun started receiving his sword for more than a few moves after that, his fighting spirit ignited and he kept charging in. It was clearly intentional to anyone watching. However, right now Jui's mind probably had no such calculations. With an expression that seemed ecstatic just to be crossing swords with Mok Jiangun, whom he believed to have reached the pinnacle of swordsmanship, how could he make any calculations? Seop Chun shook his head. "He'll be with us for a very long time." "Indeed." Clang. Once again Jui's sword flew out of his hand and stuck into the floor 5 zhang away. With this, the accumulated period reached 26 years. Grind. He gritted his teeth and stretched out his hand, calling his sword back from the floor using the empty hand grasping technique. As he was about to continue the duel again. Swish. Suddenly Mok Jiangun frowned and held out his hand, indicating him to stop. As Jui wondered why, one of Mok Jiangun's eyebrows raised. Chong Ryong, also puzzled by this reaction, asked, "Why are you doing that? Just now one of my connections was severed." "A connection was severed? Surely not. It seems one of my spirit servants has been destroyed."